Welcome back to Horrifying Stories. In July of 2009, 15-year-old Brenda Lin left for New Caledonia on a supposed one-week school excursion. However, her trip was tragically cut short when she heard of the news that her family had been found dead in their Australian home. She returned to North Epping in complete shock and disbelief at the brutal crime of her parents. Two of her siblings and her aunt had suffered. This is their horrifying story. Viewer discretion is advised. Brenda Lin was the eldest of three siblings to parents 45-year-old Min Norman Lin and 44-year-old Yunli Lily Lin. Her younger brothers Henry and Terry were aged 12 and 9 years old respectively. Her aunt, 39-year-old Yunbin, also known as Irene, was Lily's sister who lived with them helping out with the children. Needless to say, the Lin family were a typical Asian household with close family ties. Min and Lily were migrants from China who had met in Australia and decided to build their family there. They had put up a local news agency in North Epping and worked hard day in and day out. In no time, the people in their little community came to love the Lin family, and this has evidently reflected in the success of their news agency, which back then was already earning around $1 million worth of revenue annually. In 2002, Min's sister Kathy moved to Melbourne, Australia together with her husband, Robert C., who was an ear-nose-throat specialist in China. Robert wanted to shift careers at that time, so he put up a restaurant business in Melbourne. However, his restaurant never really picked up, and eventually, they decided to close it down. 3 years after they moved to Melbourne, Kathy and Robert transferred to Sydney and lived just a few blocks away from Min and Lily's house. It was then that Kathy started working part-time at her brother's news agency. Thus, on that fateful Saturday morning of July 18, 2009, when the news agency's regular customers realized that the shop was still closed that morning, they immediately called up Kathy to clarify. Everyone in town knew this was very unusual for the Lins, especially without prior notice. Upon hearing this, Kathy became alarmed as well, so she along with her husband headed for Min's house. Immediately as they arrived, they felt something was really off. The main door was left open, but nobody was downstairs. They quickly went to the second floor, straight to the master's bedroom. Then, the most horrifying and gruesome scene unfolded before their very eyes as they opened the door to Min and Lily's bedroom. It was Lily's body on the bed, all drenched in blood with her face almost unrecognizable. There were splatters of blood all over the room's white walls, ceilings, and floor, even including furniture. Lily's body was bruised and battered. Without second thought, Kathy quickly grabbed the phone and called 000, Australia's version of 911. Trembling, she tried to report the incident to the operator but was having difficulty communicating with the operator. Out of much panic, she barely found the words as she talked to the operator, sometimes already even speaking Chinese.
Hello, I need an ambulance to 55A Boundary Road.
What suburb? So 55A Boundary Road, Epping North, and it's a house?
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Yeah, the house,
What's wrong?
yeah. Hello?
What's wrong? What's wrong?
I'm not sure someone, I think I'm not sure.
You need to tell me why you need an ambulance. What's wrong?
Yeah, I think someone died. I'm not sure.
Why do you think someone's dying?
I don't know.
You need to tell me something. You're asking for an ambulance, but why?
Yeah, I also need a place, please.
Yeah, why? What's wrong?
Please.
What is wrong? Don't scream. Just answer my question.
Yeah, I need it because I have someone to be killed. I'm
Is
not
someone
sure.
bleeding? Is someone unconscious?
I think so they died.
Why? Why?
I'm not sure, but maybe someone killed my brother's family.
The rest of the rooms on the second floor had an equally gruesome sight. Irene was lying face down on her bed, covered in blood. The two brothers were found in a similar condition inside their room, with blood splatters all over the room as well. In the midst of all the panic, Robert decided to leave his wife in the house so he could fetch Min's parents and bring them to the house. Overcome with fear, Kathy begged Robert to stay with her, but Robert insisted her parents should be there. Thus, Kathy was left with no choice but to endure the horrific scene before her, as she waited for the first responders to arrive. As officers arrived at the house, Min's body was nowhere to be found. Thus, officers had no other prime suspect but Min at that point. After documenting the crime scene, the bodies of the 4 victims were taken out by the police and started searching for Min. Not long after, Kathy suggested that their bed be searched thoroughly, and it was then that Min's body was finally found covered in a duvet. Meanwhile, in New Caledonia, Brenda found herself reading through messages on Facebook informing her of the tragic incident that happened to her family. She refused to believe at first. But as soon as she arrived home on the earliest available flight, she saw the grueling scene for herself, and immediately grief and sorrow crushed her down. By far, it was considered to be the most brutal crime Australia has ever witnessed. In no time, all eyes and ears were on this developing story. News outlets across the country covered the story as the investigation went on full blast. By July 29, 2009, Kathy and Robert appeared before national television asking anyone who has information about the killings to come forward and help speed up the investigation.
If anyone can help, please contact the police.
Because the investigators have already established that not a single penny was missing in the house, robbery murder was easily ruled out. Evidence showed there were no signs of a forced entry and that the suspect knew the family well. Not only was the suspect familiar with the layout of the Lin's house, but also he or she knew Brenda was not around. Not a single blood stain nor fingerprint had been found on the doorknob of Brenda's room, signifying that the suspect also knew where Brenda's room was. Aside from that, the heartless killer also knew the location of the circuit box, as investigators had noted that the electric supply to the house was cut off before the murders actually took place, which was estimated to be as early as 2 in the morning up to 5:30 a.m. just before sunrise. All these pointed to the angle of murder-suicide, and investigators revisited the possibility of Min being the prime suspect. An autopsy of all the victims' bodies was then conducted, and it had been determined that the cause of death was extreme beating, so severe that the victims succumbed to their injuries. Then investigators proceeded to conduct an autopsy on Min's dead body. However, the results showed not a single injury in Min's body was found to be self-inflicted. Thus, the angle that Min murdered his own family and committed suicide was dismissed. The investigators were back to square one. Nevertheless, there was one thing that the investigators were sure of at that time, that there was only one suspect. The bloody shoe prints found around the house were all consistent in size and form. Upon further investigation, the sequence of the murders have been identified. It was believed that Min and Lily were the first ones that had been attacked, initially through suffocation and then through beating. A hammer-like weapon with a string attached to it had been found inside the master's bedroom and believed to have been the murder weapon. Having suffered the worst injuries of all, it signified that the murderer still had full strength while attacking the 2, and then it gradually tapered down in the next 3 victims. Further investigation of the blood splatters around the room also showed that either one or both of the boys had woken up and put up a fight, before eventually getting overpowered by the obviously much stronger murderer. 1 month later, investigators looked into another angle. 2 months before the murder happened, Min testified against an armed robbery group having seen the crime that happened right across his news agency. However, investigators later dismissed this angle. The main focus of the investigation was now on the unbelievable familiarity of the murderer in the layout of the house and of Brenda's absence. So, they shifted their attention to Min's brother-in-law, Robert C. Having been orphaned at 15 years old, Brenda was taken under the care of her Auntie Kathy and Uncle Robert. Because she was the family's sole survivor, Brenda became the sole heir of all of the family's possessions, including their family estate. However, she was only a minor. Thus Robert, who became her legal guardian, was granted a special power of attorney on her behalf. Robert used this authority to evict Brenda's grandparents from the house which Min had previously bought for them. Robert and Kathy also took over the news agency business. Despite Robert being tagged as the prime suspect, authorities permitted Brenda to continue staying with Robert and Kathy after having determined there were no foreseen threats to her life. Brenda has been taken care of by the couple, and when asked, Brenda would say the couple were the next best thing. Authorities, however, placed a secret surveillance camera in their home to monitor any suspicious activity. Then on May 7, 2010, Robert was seen to be cutting a shoebox into pieces and flushing the pieces down the drain while he was talking to Kathy. The activity was strange in itself, but what caught the attention of the investigators was that the shoebox he was cutting was the shoebox that contained the Asics Gel Elevation 2 size 9.5. The shoes were one of a kind, already phased out, and a key evidence in the ongoing investigation. It turned out that the shoe prints of this exact model matched the shoe prints found all over the Lin's home. Robert's shoe size was also within the estimated size range of the murderer, between 8.5 to 10.5. With this, investigators secured a search warrant and first searched the garage in Robert's home where he previously claimed to have been cleaning on the morning of the murder. During the search, a stain tagged as Stain 91 was found inside a chest drawer in the garage. After undergoing DNA testing on this newfound evidence, Stain 91 was found to be a DNA mixture that matched the DNAs of 4 out of 5 victims. The same DNA mixture found in Stain 91 also matched another stain found in one of the mattresses. Despite the strong evidence, Kathy and Brenda truly believed Robert was innocent and wrongly accused. However, the principal from Brenda's school found Robert's behavior around Brenda odd. During a school gathering where Brenda and Robert had attended together, she felt something was off after seeing him physically too close to Brenda and observing how Robert was manipulative of her. Finally, on May 5, 2011, 2 years after the murder, Robert Z was arrested for 5 counts of murder. His multiple bail requests have all been denied by court. Investigators also planted Robert's inmate as an informant, dubbed as Witness A, in exchange for a reduction of sentence. The inmate said Robert told him he bought a hammer from a $2 store that had no security cameras. He attacked the victims using martial arts and the hammer he bought, also showing him the pressure points on the neck where one can easily lose consciousness when hit. By 2012, the year that followed, after investigators presented sufficient evidence to court, Robert Z was committed to trial for multiple counts of murder. The first trial was held in February 2013. Robert maintained his innocence and Kathy was there by his side to support him in the ordeal. Brenda testified in court, and it was there that she admitted having suffered sexual assault from her uncle. Apparently, this had started long before the murder incident and even escalated further after the murder when she had been transferred under their care. The reason why she didn't speak up about it was that she truly believed that his uncle was innocent. The second trial happened 3 months later, and the prosecutor presented Robert's motive for the crime. It was alleged that his interest in Brenda and his growing envy towards the success of Min, fueled even more by the thought that Min and Kathy's parents obviously favored Min more, was the motivating factor in such a heinous crime. Sadly, the trial was postponed to February 2015 because the judge had an illness. A new judge took over the case with a new jury 9 months later. At that time, Robert had already been imprisoned for 5 years. However, the new jury was not able to come up with a final verdict. He was released on bail but with very specific restrictions and was set for retrial in 2016. It was only on January 12, 2017, 8 years after the gruesome murder, that Robert was convicted of 5 counts of murder and was charged with life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, even until the final sentencing, Robert was firm about his plea for innocence. In an interview, to this day, Brenda regrets not being able to hug her father goodbye when he dropped her off at the airport for their school excursion. In her mind, she would just be away for a week. Little did she know, it was their last goodbye. Thank you for making it this far. If you liked this video, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel. We would love to hear from you. Again, thank you and see you in the next one.